Scott Franklin Hugh. He is off today doing other things. He's asked me to come by and host this morning, which I actually could. So I appreciate everybody coming on board. If you are new to this, if you are a CMPS member especially, you can join in. There's a couple ways to participate. One is to go to simply watch it and comment. Comments, though, we can put on the air and discuss them. So it's just not a place just to watch. You can actually ask questions and make comments at facebook.naturalphilosophy.org. What that really does is that will forward you to our Facebook page where you will see us live right now. And then also you can go to youtube.naturalphilosophy.org, and it likewise will take you to our YouTube channel, and you can watch and participate. Any of the comments that you type in there will come to our system. We're using our new system, which we have now officially moved to for good. We were using the Fuse system, but of course the Fuse system became quite expensive, and this actually is a little bit better. It's with StreamYard, and this is allowing us to, in fact, broadcast live, which will into YouTube as well, and to Facebook at the exact same time. We are on both of those platforms, and the idea is to draw more people in. I do a science chat, not a science chat, but I do a dissident science live stream on Fridays. Myself, from my audience, have almost 2,500 subscribers now, which is great. If you're some of my subscribers who have jumped on here, I've been telling people about this. I welcome you. We've been doing this since actually 2008 through many different cycles of different systems. We actually have some recordings from back then. I think, what was it called? Dim or something very strange, the name of the video recording back then. We don't have, unfortunately, all the recordings of all the chats that we did during that time, but it was quite fruitful. And since then, almost without too much break, we've been doing that. So that's over 10 years we've been doing it. It's been quite a success. And now we're in the new world of being able to stream online live to Facebook and YouTube. And so that's why it's very important for everybody who is a member of the CMPS to let people know about it. We want to get as many people subscribing. We are actually growing our subscribership for our channel. I think what we are up to now, let me check here. We're just waiting for people to be coming on here. So if you go to our website, naturalphilosophy.org, we do have the counts. So what do we have right now? Oh yeah, we're up to 511 subscribers. Not bad, too bad at all. And we have other channels. We'll take a look at our webpage here. This is the top of our webpage. Our announcement, of course, for the our weekly chats here. And you can see right next to it, of course, are our YouTube channels of those people who are on our in our organization. The John Chappell channel started out a couple of years ago. We're 100 and something, so we are growing quite nicely. These live streams to YouTube are going to hopefully attract more people. Those people who are subscribed to the YouTube channel, you will be alerted to, if you are subscribed and you click on the little bell, you will be alerted to when we do go live. And that's, again, a great plus. It allows anybody actually who wants to wander in and take, talk with us, chat with us, or just watch. There's a Dissident Science channel, like I said, that's growing quite well. And we have the Particle Guru, which is my father. He is growing slowly but steadily. He's got 237 subscribers. Nick of Time, he has a lot of great videos. If you haven't seen them on special relativity, I really love his videos. Highly recommend them. And then Energy Wave Theory, Jeff Yee, he's an up-and-coming scientist in our group. He's very savvy, and I've been helping him actually with his YouTube channel. He's up to 641, which is pretty good. From scratch. He started, later than all of us, and he's putting together some really nice videos about his work. I'm really pleased with that. And where we are in the world here of the internet, just to catch you up, I know because that's the what I work on a lot. Our Science Woke channel is going Science Woke. Well, we have a Science Woke here. He does have a Science Woke. Yeah, here we go. Here are the two websites that you want to visit. This is the website you're looking at right now, which is our natural philosophy website, which is more for you if you are a member of the organization, or you want to know about the organization and all the technical papers and all the members. I think we have 300 members worldwide. These, if you click on here, these are members who are pretty much active in, over 300 members active. Unfortunately, we just lost Ron Hatch. He's a really good friend, and that was a real sad thing. We do have a memorial page actually, and as we go on, a lot of the people that we have come to know and love have passed on. A good friend of mine, Jeff Hunter, he passed away in December. But we have all the members here, so you can see our members. You can see about our science. We have forums. Here are some scientific areas, and these, if you click on any of these, for instance, like the Big Bang, you'll be able to get people who are related to those theories. This one is ether. These are topics you can click on, and then you can see sort of things from our database. For instance, we have 466 abstracts having to do with ether, 55 books on ether. The scientists who are involved in ether are here too. This website I did a while back. This is our db.naturalphilosophy.org. We have a database of a lot of stuff. We also have a Wikipedia. And that Wikipedia that has 10,500 pages, so you can go through here. This is basically from our website. I actually wrote a program to translate all that and get them over here, so you can see. We actually have the ability to put full papers on here now. Let's see here. Let's see. Click on one of these papers, and the reason I'm saying that is one of the projects we're looking to do and trying to get maybe some funding is to get ourselves to be able to, oh man, I've got a broken, oh, there I go. I just wanted to show you the math part of it, and guess what? It's broken because we had an upgrade of PHP. Well, so much for that, but I'm going to have to fix that. I'm writing that down now. Dave D. Hilster, and what I need to do, fix the math. It's the language. It's run on PHP, which is a language for the internet. So anyways, I'm just sort of giving people a background here. So if you've come across this, we have people waiting in the room. We have what's nice about the this StreamYard is that allows us to stream again directly to the social media sites, YouTube and Facebook, but it also has a waiting room. So I have, I think we have Ian Cohen, Carl Reif, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and of course Harry Ricker, one of my favorite scientists who won't let anything get through. He will not let any, how do you say, BS get through anytime. I really enjoy his commentaries because he's no holds bar. And he also is one of our featured writers on science. I haven't he's got so many articles, but I've been putting them up slowly. And I've just been busy, and I apologize for those, our Science Woke website here. And if you go here to About, you'll see our editorial staff and Harry Ricker. He is an amazing writer. You can see the last one I put up is October 7th. I try to put them up at least once or twice a month. I've been busy because I'm selling we're trying to sell this. Actually, we're under contract selling our place, moving into a new place here in Boca Raton to have my father move in with us. He's 82, so we're trying to do that. So I've been busy, but if you haven't read Harry Ricker's articles, he's a fantastic writer. That's one of his backgrounds. And in fact, if you go to our editorial staff page, you'll find out here about those of us who write. We have Dr. Alexander Unsker, who writes for us, but Harry Ricker here, you can read about his background is a science writer. Again, I would highly recommend reading his works. In fact, if you go to our popular pages here, which is good, is we're getting a lot. It tells you the most popular pages, the counts that we have. You can see that some articles here. One here that's already got 250 views. It's been here only since August. Is Dr. Louis Essen, inventor of atomic clock, rejects Einstein's theory. So you can see here's another one. Special relativity is irksome. So we have his and other people's articles available here. And so you want to check that out if you want to become, we call it science woke, but at least learn about what the problems in science are. This is doing very well. If any of you want to check out how we're doing, we're almost up to 20,000 views. We're as of today approaching 19,000 views since we launched, which has been less than a year ago. And you can see, in fact, last night I was talking about Dr. Glenn Borkert and Yonel Danu, so some people have come in and taken a look at that. But we also have our forums, we have Wikipedia. We do have a university that we're going to be working on in the future. We're looking hopefully to get some funding to do some of these projects. One of them is just to get the information out there. I mean, this stuff takes a lot of time, but this has been a great success. So anyways, I thank you all for joining us today, and I guess we're going to get started. I'll bring some people up here and say hello. I don't have really much planned in the way of topics because I just found out about this not too long ago, but I do see Ian Cohen here, so I'm going to bring him up. Hopefully he's got his earbuds and everything, so I'll bring him up and say hello. Let me get the banners here. We have, Stefan. I do see him. I think Stefan's actually one of my subscribers, and he's come to the Saturday morning chat, so I appreciate you coming by. And let me get the branding down here. Oh, I did. We've got that. And Ian, I'm going to bring you on, so get ready. We'll see how this works here. So how are you doing, Ian?
Hello, David. Hello, everybody.
So tell us where you're from, because I do have, even though I know this has been a routine with Franklin and everything, I try to, it's nice to have, give Franklin a break, and I do have people who come in my direction from my YouTube channel. Why don't you tell me a little about yourself? I already see a couple of my subscribers here, and they're probably not familiar too much with the CMPS. Well, a little bit about the CMPS, but about the dissonance. What brings you here? Are you a famous physicist? Are you a crazy crackpot? Or what are you? Give us a little background about yourself.
Just incidentally, quickly, David, I can't see other people in the conference at the moment. I can't even see their names. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, that's no problem. I don't know. This is pretty new technology, so sometimes, and I do want to say to everybody who is participating in our waiting room, which we have a waiting room online here, and I'm controlling that here, and I see everybody. If for some reason you don't hear me or don't hear another person or don't see someone, you can always go out and come back in. This is beta. And so it's just something that is still, because of the new technology. It's fantastic technology to be able to stream this and have these kinds of controls. But if you don't see it, there's no problem. I will definitely let you know, but I'm seeing you and hearing you fine. So tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, I think this is one of the things that's really important for people new to here, is because they're worried that we're all scientists from MIT with PhDs, or from Oxford and from the Einstein Institute. But some people have quite an amazing background. But what got you into what we would call science outside the mainstream?
Right. Well, I'll try to be brief and yet cover the main aspects, David. Because the late Glenn Baxter did an interview with me some years ago about this, and he asked these fundamental questions. Well, Basically, I'm sort of like an engineering scientist. I have bachelor's degrees in engineering and mathematics, and I subsequently actually followed that up with some research in mathematical modeling and computer simulation of thermal response of buildings and things like that. It was the time of the first energy crisis. So I finished that to doctoral level. I have a PhD as well. So I like to think anyway that I was always an inquisitive person, and I was always questioning things. And I think I can remember when I was about 18 years old, studying in first year physics, Einstein's special theory of relativity, and just being struck by the contradiction between sort of reciprocity. What ultimately drove people like Dingle to say that how can a clock be faster and slower at the same time? I found all these paradoxes quite strange and not answered properly. However, I went ahead with the mainstream, and I think maybe one of the persons actually I do give credit to, if credit is the right word, for getting me thinking and getting me involved probably in the dissident movement was Alf Kelly, the late Alf Kelly, whom you probably know about. So he gave a number. So I'm Irish, as Alf Kelly was. I'm from Dublin. I'm not sure if he originally came from Dublin, but he certainly lived and worked in Dublin. And he gave a number of lectures, maybe in the early 90s, maybe early to mid 90s. The first ones I think were given in Trinity College Dublin, which is my alma mater, on I think I saw a poster in the place I worked in, which I'll tell you about in a moment, saying because of things like the Sagnac effect, the postulates of special relativity are now suspect and so on. Sure, so I thought, what's the Sagnac effect? I'd never been taught it as an undergraduate and so on. So I went to that lecture in Trinity College, and I actually, there were a couple of colleagues of mine from where I worked who were there, and I thought they were a bit dismissive. I mean, one chap in the audience was just saying to me, that's a lot of rubbish. How can he say that? That everybody knows that's wrong. So I said, well, just listen to him, because I was struck by what he was saying. And I said, I'd better investigate this more quickly, in more detail. He was sort of saying with their alternative explanations of the Michelson-Morley experiment, if the ether was basically traveling with the Earth in its orbit around the sun. And so that was the first time I thought of that. So I said, I'd look into that. And then there was some infamous or famous correspondence, mainly in the Irish Times, between Alf Kelly and what might be considered the mainstream scientific community. There might have been one or two letters from ordinary people, but he got some academic responses and also some responses from the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. Now, the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies, interestingly enough, was set up in 1940 by Eamon de Valera, who was the then Taoiseach or Prime Minister, but it was modelled on the Princeton Institute for Advanced Studies, which he had visited. So, but those responses were quite hostile to Kelly and insulting and so on. You probably know about Kelly. I mean, he was an interesting person. He basically ended up in the electricity supply utility, but he did a PhD in the mid '60s. When he was working there. On basically like a siphon of water, and that actually the column of water which it would support would be greater than atmospheric pressure, and this seems to be due to cavitation and bubbles in the water. I looked at it and I said, that's interesting, but it seems to be a bit trivial. But anyway, it's a novel idea. But he claims that the professor of mechanical engineering in University College Dublin, Professor Timoney, who was his supervisor, got him thinking about special relativity, because he said, I don't believe in special relativity, and I'd advise you to research it because you've got an inquiring mind. So he said that Timony got him thinking on that. Now, Kelly then gave some other lectures. He gave.
Just a minute. Is this Dr. Is it Dr. Al Kelly?
Yeah, sometimes Alf or Al, A-L or Alf. It might have been Alfred.
Okay, so this guy here, do you see him?
Yes.
Okay.
Quite so. That's him.
Okay.
That's him as a younger person. He died in 2005, probably in his early 80s. So he'd be a bit younger in that photograph. Yeah. So he wrote a book on how to make your life easier at work, a sort of a psychological book, and he had a number of things to his name. He also actually was quite. I had the honor of being requested by Cynthia Whitney, the editor of Galilean Electrodynamics, to write an obituary for him, which I did, which appeared in Galilean Electrodynamics. And I think the issue in which my obituary appeared also had a posthumous article from him, because he had just died maybe a month before that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So there is a link, I think, maybe in the material that you've put up on your websites, which you referred to about 10 minutes ago, David, to that, but I think it's only an abstract. But anyway, it's available. So Kelly made some interesting discoveries, I suppose, when he was working in alternative energy and maybe fluidized bed combustion. I don't know. It's in the obituary. I can't remember exactly, but he made fundamental engineering thing. So Kelly gave one or two lectures then on things like unipolar induction, and he did quite a number of experiments, repeating Faraday's fundamental experiments in the 1850s and before that, and also some new experiments. And he gave a couple of lectures on those, and he gave another lecture on sort of like his cosmological ideas about the yes, you have it there. You're showing interesting things. So that book, Challenging Modern Physics. Now, that book, I suppose, was published posthumously as well, because I knew he was writing it. And when I'm skipping the gun now. So I was in contact with his family, and just by pure serendipity, by pure chance, my boss, the chief executive of the organization I worked for, which I haven't told you about yet, was actually his son. He was on contract for 10 years or something. So I got to know him a bit that way. We were on first name terms. So I didn't go to all his lectures, but I actually sent the family a copy of my obituary, which appeared in GED, and I said I'd be grateful if they'd let me know when this book, Challenging Modern Physics, appeared. I'd love to get a copy of it. I'd go and buy it. But actually, they sent me a complimentary copy, which I have on my shelves now, and it's quite an interesting book. So I do claim that Kelly, got me started to a certain extent. I didn't go to all his lectures, but I looked into the business. Particularly, I said I'm going to investigate this whole basis of relativity, of special relativity, of Einstein and so on, and all the other bits, and E equals MC squared and all that. And I I went a bit further maybe than he did in some ways. And I'm also a bit of a theoretician, so I got the I believe experiments must come first, but I got the experiments and all the results, which really amazed me actually. And then I started working out a mathematical theory, and I was influenced in that way by people like the Italian Monti, who'd done some work on maybe the properties of the ether, like the electrical conductivity of the ether, and other people have influenced me. So I published a paper in GED in 2003, November 2003, and I got involved in a dissident group in the former Soviet Union in Russia. And you've probably heard of it. They run these conferences on space, time, and gravitation. And there was an American gentleman who did a lot of interesting work on, which again actually had influenced me, on, well, one might call it a tired light, but what one might call it is well, he was doing actually radar measurements, planetary radar measurements and echoes and so on. And he was looking at factors like that. And I'm just trying to think of his name. His name has just escaped me. But he was at one of these earlier conferences, maybe, oh goodness me, about 20 years ago or more. And he wrote about it extensively. I'll think of his name in a minute. Anyway, I attended. I was invited. I got in touch with them and so on and so forth. He was working. I've forgotten his name. It'll come to me in a second now. But he was working with a Russian lady in Pulkovo University, Svetlana Tolchanikova, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Mm-hmm. You've probably heard of her. She's she's in our area, and so I had actually quoted her and him in my reference, and I told her that, and they said, well, this paper you're publishing is very interesting. Would you like to give a talk on the subject to the 8th conference, 7th or 8th conference in 2004, August 2004 in St. Petersburg, which I did. So it's published. Yeah, you've got it there. You're quick. It's actually published on your wiki. So you've got a lot of information there. Now, I'm rambling around a bit, but and feel free to interrupt if I haven't made anything clear. When I finished my research, my doctoral research, I got a job in the then Institute for Industrial Research and Standards. I say the then because it's been abolished since, but it was a body, multidisciplinary scientific technical organization, which was meant to help. Well, it was set up in 1946 to help nascent Irish industry, which was fairly basic at the time. I mean, we were looking at things like using peat to produce gases, or maybe to produce waxes for shoe polish. Quite elementary things, but anyway, we developed into a more high-tech area by the 1960s, and I was working in alternative renewable energy. I became the alternative energy specialist of the institute, and in particular I was in charge of a big solar pilot test facility, which was one of a number all over the then EEC. I think there were 8 of them all over the EEC, and we were comparing the results and so on. So that was running for a few years, and then I got more involved in industrial energy and cogeneration, that sort of thing. And but I moved over then to a division of the institute, which was called the Standards Division. But that became an autonomous body some years later, under the name of the National Standards Authority of Ireland, NSAI, which is the equivalent of ANSI in the US, for example, or BSI in the UK. So it became a separate standalone organization. I moved over to that then in the mid-80s, basically to work on electrotechnical standards and information technology, telecommunication standards, which in a way is my original area, because I'm actually an electrical engineer. So I've been working on that until I retired in 2017, just about 2.5 years ago. So I've had a lot more time to so I think I'm more busy than ever, as everybody says. But now I got involved with Glenn Baxter. It's hard to know the origin of it, but I think my name appeared obviously from GED and maybe the Russian conference and so on, and whatever. I got in touch with Glenn. Yeah, I do remember now. I was asked to give a paper in January 2013. No, yes, January 2013 on my ideas. Glenn Baxter. It was Glenn Baxter's. And it was recorded. I have the audio recording. The recording was up on Glenn Baxter's site, but when he died some years ago, that seemed to disappear. But so I met Harry Ricker, whom you mentioned earlier, and I met Nick Percival, virtually, obviously, through the conference. And I met quite a number of people then. I met an interesting chap who used to participate, called Al McDowell, who wrote this book, Uncommon Knowledge. I haven't heard from him recently, but he was. So there were a few people I got quite close to, and I was on terms of just sending emails directly to the people like that. They had weekly teleconferences, but I was working at the time, and I really could only participate occasionally. And then, of course, they had the Saturday NPA conferences. Maybe they came a bit later. But again, I started to participate in those. Maybe a bit more regularly than I was able to, because Glenn Baxter's conferences were on a weekday. I think they were perhaps Monday. Okay, so then Glenn died a few years ago, and then there was the political shenanigans, I don't know, in the NPA and all that, which I wasn't really involved with, but I know, David, it was a difficult time for you. And anyway, you have a new system now, the CNPS, which is carrying the can now, and it's doing a very good job. I mean, I'm extremely impressed with all your work and your IT work, and so I'm participating in that. It's my dissident science fix, you know. Unfortunately, I'm not able to participate every single Saturday, but I am able to participate. I'd say most Saturdays now, actually, because
Well, it's not easy. I know. For a time, everybody has different times where they can participate or not. Myself as well, because of everything I went through, because of the transition. My wife became extremely upset with this organization because it had caused me such stress that I actually lost a job. Thank goodness, right now I'm at a job where they actually knew about my film Einstein Wrong, and my current boss, who actually my current boss, I work in the supercomputing group for my specialty is human language and computers, but my boss lives in Cork. So I haven't been there. So I in fact, on my watch here, I have Cork, Ireland. Right now, it's a 3:33 or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've got that connection, but I know going through that transition was really hard, and I've not been able to take part in these as much as I've liked to. I know I actually started these numbers of year in 2008. And it seemed it went on quite a while. And who was also taking over this whole Saturday morning thing was Greg Volk. And through the years, of course,
yes, I forgot to mention Greg Volk. He was very important in inviting me actually to give that presentation.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And he and I are just absolutely great friends, and we couldn't be politically or religiously on opposite ends, but what brings and keeps us together is absolutely science. And I think that's one of the great things about our organization. In fact, that's one of the things I'm looking to do. I had this really crazy epiphany less than a couple of weeks ago, where I was thinking, because we our group, when we do there's a couple things happening. One of the questions, I'm going to take you down here, so you don't have to sit there and be on camera here, but you stand by with us. But thanks for your story. But I'm going to
I'll give you a slight update later, maybe on one or two things I've spoke about recently, and something I'm doing next week.
Okay, that sounds good. No, absolutely. All right, but I'll talk a little bit about this, and that is, as a lot of people know, we've been having in 2015 was our first CNPS conference. Now, again, our organization still has pretty much the same people. We lost very few people in that transition. I think it was an unfortunate circumstance. In fact, the person who was involved mostly in creating that problem has passed on now. But we're over it. Greg Volk continues to work. I'm in constant contact with him. He's working again. He was extremely involved with us, but had to get back to his own life. But he's actually working on trying to get us some support. And so he is working on some things. But since 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So we've had 5 conferences, and they've grown a little bit steadily. We've gotten more people, but we're losing people as well. I mean, one of the reasons we're giving people lifetime achievement awards is because they're older. In 2010, in my documentary film, it's part of my documentary film, we gave awards to 3 people in Los Angeles area whose average age was 92. So we are in a transitional phase. People that I've been involved with since I was in my mid 30s. I'm going to be 60 this month and next week. less than a week. And since then, we have just lost such amazing people. When I think back at how many amazing scientists we have seen come and go lately, it's just it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. So the good thing is that we're trying to keep these things alive. We're trying to keep these people's works documented. Ron Hatch has just recently passed. We're talking with his son about keeping and getting his work. I mean, one of the I see as missions of our group is simply to catalog all this amazing stuff, and that's what I've been involved in since about 2008. And so one of the things about the conference is I am looking at two separate ideas, very different ideas, and I know these may seem a little bit shocking or not shocking. One of them is very new, but I wanted to put that out here and get people's opinions. One, of course, is an easier one, which would be doing it conference, video conferencing. That is, instead of us taking the time and people the money to fly, and very few people today, a lot of the people who are doing that, for instance, when we had our CMP, the MPA meeting in Albuquerque, my goodness, or in Maryland, we were having upwards of 70, 80 people. And of course, when you have that many people, it's well worth people's while. And we would actually have to have breakout rooms in 2010. And here in Long Beach, when I lived in Long Beach, we had quite a few people. But today and age, it's just gotten expensive for people with this, unfortunately, the political climate, the income inequality problem, which is actually a real problem where I as a professional, I'm in a pretty high profession, at least technically. And my salary was the exact same salary pretty much from 1998 to 2016. So if that's the case, you can imagine people even on fixed incomes who are retired. It's just harder and harder for them to travel. So I have this whole scheme of where I've thought about putting together an online conference where people would pay to participate and to give papers using this system. It would be, of course, we do have, of course, our broadcasting system, but that would be one way to do it. And the way it would be done is if you are to participate, you would pay so much. We allow it to, if you wanted to, for instance, we were going to have this conference using this system. We have 10 seats in rooms. We can have it so that if you are a speaker, you pay so much to speak. If you are a person who pays a fee, you will be brought into the waiting room, which we have up to 10 people, where you can participate. Then, of course, it's all open to anybody who can see it. And, there's a lot of advantages to that. The only difference would be is for me, myself, for instance, I take a week's vacation and I fly somewhere and then I do all this production. It's not easy. It's painstaking. It's a lot of work. We're always on the edge of, will the budget fit, especially with a smaller amount? And we've literally only survived our last conferences because of donations from a couple of people who give us, a number of thousands of dollars, and that helps keep things going. But so one idea would be to have the conference from Wednesday to Saturday and literally have it completely online, do the exact same thing we do, except that way we can have a lot more people participate. We eliminate all the problems with the expenses that people have. I personally like the conferences, but that are in person, and I think we can get back to them if we grow, but that's one idea. The other idea I have, which is really a lot more crazy, and I just had this literally, and you guys this is the first time I'm actually saying it. I even talked to, but Greg Volk went out and talked at the Tesla Tech conference, which is always in Flagstaff, I think it's Flagstaff, Arizona. And I was thinking about, we could get together with them. But one of the things that I've noticed, especially from my group, my Dissident Science YouTube channel, is I get people from all spectrum. I get people who are UFO people. I get people who are people who are a lot of people from Electric Universe. I get a lot of people who are from other YouTube channels, like Distinti's got his following, and there are other people that have their followings. And so we have the EU group, we have the Tesla group. There's another group that was actually at, that has a small group, sort of like the CMPS. We're bigger than they are. But one idea would be is to make a conference that would actually be a call for a joint conference under the guise of we support each other, all of us, anybody outside the mainstream. And I'm not talking about having, conferences that talk about UFOs, but I'm talking about getting all the conferences that are challenging mainstream ideas. In fact, the whole UFO phenomenon, a lot of it has to do with people wanting new technologies. When I talk to some of my subscribers in my Friday night live system, what I do, I just did last night, I find that some of the people who've been interested in UFOs are actually more interested in technologies that they think we should have now. And that's what they said. Well, if we could get these UFOs, we get the technology. I said, what you're really interested in is technology. And the reason we don't have technology is because science is broken. We know. I mean, Ian Cohen, we were just talking with him. We'll talk with him a little bit later. We know that science is broken, and we know that we could be technologically way further in science if we would be open to new ideas, and this is a free world. Anybody can come up with any model they want, and they can do anything they want, write their own book, come up with a YouTube channel. And I'm thinking, and I think I'm in a unique position that I could do that, because I've always been all inclusive. And that's one of the things about the Dissident channel people like about my YouTube channel, is I praise 100%. I support 100% all of these people, including the EU. I'm not saying, and this is, I support even what people consider their most far out ideas. The reason is if we don't do that, then we are never going to grow. We're never going to get people interested. That's why the CMPS has been really great. The only rule we have is you cannot give papers about conspiracy theories, political papers that have to, whether God exists or not, those kinds of things. But if we were to have a conference, and my idea is if the CMPS, myself included, were to come up with a conference, and let's say we did it at Tesla Tech, and we would say, look, if you are UFO people, if you are people who are the EU people, if you are there's a couple other groups, we're going to all get together. We're going to support each other. We're going to have a main room where we're going to have main lectures, and then we can have all the subgroups there. Now, I know the EU has their own group, but I know a lot of people who their conference. I think they're finally having another conference in Oregon in 2020, next year in August. But the idea would be is to call people and get them out of the shadows. The people who challenge climate change, and to me, it's not climate change. The idea is that we should allow, yes, we're destroying the earth. I think that's pretty much, we all believe that, but whether or not the temperature is rising. But all these things, we sort of have been shying away from the CMPS. It doesn't mean we will support it, but what we can do is bring all these people together. And now listen to what I have to say about this. Some people are going to think this is not a good idea. Well, the reason I think it's a good idea, number one, these groups are going through the same thing. They've been going through the same thing. There's Tesla Tech has had better years, and I think it's economy. And again, it's economy. There's another group that's a cosmological group that's similar to ours but smaller. We have our group that has over 300 active members. They pay, believe me. We're paying our bills. And then we have a lot of EU people that a lot of times, those people, there's a lot of those people, and they're interested also in the stuff we do. But if we were to have and call together all of those groups at once with Tesla Tech there, and make it and say, look, okay, the CMPS will have its room EU people will have its room. The cosmological people will have its room. People, if they're into the UFO, can have their room. But we would all come together under the guise of we should allow people to come up and talk about things in an open forum, and sort of I would call it like not AltCon, but the idea is to be something like a conference. I don't want to say science dialogue conference. I mean, it's a terrible name, but the idea is, and then everyone can come. And there's people. We got new people in biology, which is the Mir model, which is amazing. If you haven't seen that, I can't remember his name. He's a guy here in Florida, and he gave a talk this year at the University of Washington. So the idea would be is, okay, we're smaller, and each group could take care of themselves, but regardless, I think that may be an interesting alternative if we were to do it at the same time Tesla Tech did, and work with Tesla Tech and said, okay, we have a main room, and you'd have a speaker from the EU group, a speaker from the cosmology group, a speaker from our group, a speaker from Tesla Tech. And that would also, the thing that would be very good, and it's one of the things I find, is Tesla Tech and the people who are into UFOs, that kind of stuff, the technology part of it are really needing to get more discipline in the theoretical side. And so I think if they became, and they were welcomed into, if we were to do this, the CMPS would have more people coming by and looking at what's going on. And this way we would join forces. So I would help organize it so that, how do we have a joint conference? How do you do the money correctly? Obviously you'd have to distribute it as to how many of those members, of each group would have it. So you wouldn't have it so that, all the money would come in and each group would get, we'd have to do it in a politically correct way. But I think it's something that's really a possibility. And I'm going to talk to Steve about this. And I know there's enough people in the EU that would be interested in making an EU room and saying, hey, people in the CMPS, you don't know about the electric universe, come our way, take a look at it. Hey, Tesla Tech, the guy says, hey, we've got these experiments. The theoreticians, we had a joint talk one time at the Tesla Tech about 10 years ago. And it was interesting because people started talking about the fancy words Tesla Tech, free energy and free this. And anyways, it was interesting to say, well, okay, let's calm down. Let's start looking at the words we're using and understanding. And they found it, I found it, I could mediate between the two groups because the people in Tesla Tech have this fantastic sort of Harry Potter world vocabulary, but they're doing a really amazing stuff. So I try to bring them down to earth on that. And then for us our people to see what these Tesla Tech people are doing, which are more garage mechanics doing really pretty amazing stuff that people can't figure out. Well, maybe our theoreticians can figure out. So those are the two ideas, to have sort of a joint conference where everybody supports everybody else. And so, yes, if you go to this conference, you may not subscribe to the anthropological things that the EU group does, but that's not the point. The point is we need to support people with critical minds thinking outside the box. Let me get to some of the comments over here. Here we go. This is just sort of fun. Greetings from Iceland. Keep it up. Rainier from Iceland. Again, I think he may have been from the Dissident Science Channel. Glad to see you here. And I said, sometime I'd love to go to Iceland, actually. Iceland is really important for the expansion of tectonics. You know why? Because it's on one of the spreading plates right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So there's a place in Iceland where you can see the two tectonic plates and you can dive between them, and the water's really clear. One of the interesting aspects of the expansion tectonics is that many people who subscribe to that water is being manufactured inside the Earth, just like methane and oil, and it comes upwards, and one of those things is water. And of course that's brand new water being manufactured inside the Earth. Let's see here, we also have some more people here talking. Says, I'm a young viewer, I would like more debate amongst different theories. Electric universes versus pressure theory should be a title. We have to think the herd and show willingness to debate amongst ourselves. Absolutely. That's really tough. A lot of times I find that one of the problems that being in a leadership position here in our group is that people get so infighting amongst ourselves that we stop to forget about to debate. We get so emotionally attached to our own ideas and our own theories that, in fact, we get ourselves in our own ways. We become dogmatic about our own theories, and that's not good. And a lot of the other thing that I don't understand is people, and I know Harry Ricker brings up a lot of questions about people's own people's models, is people that seem to ignore them. That bothers the heck out of me. And, for instance, my father and I have a particle model, and then I'll ask an ether person a question that I have. My personal feeling is I'm not an ether. So I haven't seen an ether model that, to me, I think it's ether to me is a solution to just light. And then once people do that, then they want to stick gravity in the middle. But that's my own opinion. But when I bring up any objections, like when people bring up objections about my father and I's my particle model, my dad and I go back and talk about it. What do we do? But people don't do that. What they do is they become, again, dogmatic in their own theory and their own ways. Even electric universe people, folks, even the electric universe people. And I think one of the things about the electric universe people, they're always constantly trying to get verification that this is the right way. And the way I tell everybody is what Alexander Unserker says: just work on it. Just go forward. The idea that you're not going to convince anybody necessarily in a debate. The only thing that debates really do is to show how whether or not the people of that theory, whether it's one person or a whole group, are so dogmatic that they will not address the real problems, and therefore that theory is going to not be as accepted. So I think the debate's welcome, but if the debate's purpose is to prove one theory over another, or for people to simply be more entrenched that EU will beat the pressure theory any day or the particle model any day, I think that's not the right attitude. But I have a feeling, and my frustration with all this is that with the people who have their theories, and we try to set up these debates, is they don't listen to each other. One person will get up and they'll tell them, this is why electric universe is the best theory, and here's all the reasons and all the things we can predict and all that. That's great. And then the other person says, oh yeah, but this is the pressure theory and this is all we do. And there's no debate. What happens is, what we need is that the pressure, other people give the electric, what we really need to do, I think, instead of even a debate between theories, is to have our group come up with real questions, for instance, Harry Ricker. Again, I bring him up because he is one of those people who constantly do that, and that's why I really enjoy him intellectually, is to bring fundamental questions, and you got to answer them. That what happens is, when you ask these questions to people, even on these Saturday morning chats, I've watched it, and people will be talking about their theory, and you say, well, what about this? Well, that's no. Answer the question, or say to people what my father and I say often is, we don't know. That is an absolute great problem with our theory. We don't know the answer to that. I wish and I agree with you. That's the way we should be doing it. That's the way my father and I are our worst critics of the model we have. I mean, there's days when he and I look at it and we say, this is just a joke. And then other days we say, this is really good, but we're the ones always doing that. That again, having a debate between those two, it's not like, let's find out who wins. It would really be to talk about the problems and have them go back and forth. So I'm not sure debates between two theories would work, but I think having a theory get up and defend itself with real questions. Then I would say, do the electric universe, do the pressure theory, do the particle theory, do Jeff Yee's energy wave theory, and have those questions asked directly with them. But that's a good comment. It says, earthquake predictions, plasma universe could include electric fields, yeah, well, again, that's pretty specific to the electric universe. I guess plasma universe. Again, electric universe is great to look at the electrical effects in the universe, but in many of our opinion, there are other effects as well. In our model, we can clearly see where the line is, what is considered to be electrical and what is considered to be gravitational in this case. Again, it depends on your model. The only thing I can say to electric universe, until you guys have a real physical model for everything you're talking about, it's going to be hard to answer those questions. And that's just my opinion. Okay. Those are some of the comments. Here, let's see. We have a private chat. Let's see. I'm going to look here. Harry asked yes. What is the address? Ron Hatch was at the St. Peter's Conference with me in 2003. Yep. I see that. So, Ian Cohen's, you guys are, there's a private chat amongst the people, I think, in the room can do that. So, Bob Gray is here. I have the private chat. Harry Ricker, Bob Gray, Carl Reef. I know Ian's already been talking. Would any of you like to come on and talk a bit? I know that Ian certainly is willing to do that, but I do want to give other people a chance who are in the waiting room. We're coming up to 1 hour. And those, of course, who are watching live, we have actually most of the people who are watching live from us are on YouTube. So there are at least 12 people watching us right now. So that's great. And this grows. I mean, last night I had an average of over 20 on my Dissidents Science channel. So these kinds of things do work. And over time, they work well. So let's see. Go back to the private chat. I'm not hearing anything from Bob Gray or Harry. I know you're there. I will bring you up, but please say, tell me if you are, I'd like to hear your opinion on induction interests me. He says, I'd like to hear you on unipolar induction. I think that was a question from Bob Gray to perhaps Ian, but Ian, I'm going to bring you back up. Hey, hello.
I was muted. Okay.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
No, well, I muted myself. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways,
so
you heard some before we go on. Unfortunately, it's like herding cats sometimes, as they say, because people are very independent here. But I am looking seriously about those two options of trying to join with other groups, not to have a joint conference, but to have a conference at the same time. In person versus also a video. One of the actually suggestions could be as well that we would have a video conference and an in-person conference once every year, 6 months apart. The video conference can have papers, we can put them up, we can do all the same things, they can have a proceedings. I mean, what's your feelings on those things? I just think that traveling is tough to have these small groups maybe sustain themselves. Maybe in together we could have a in-person type of conference. What do you have any feelings about that? If you don't, that's fine too.
Well, I mean, my feelings are that I'm all in favor of investigating things like that, David. I mentioned to Franklin on a number of occasions, that I regretted that I hadn't been able to travel to your conferences. I mean, it's not such a big deal even to travel to the West Coast of the United States, to Washington State or something for a retired person. It could be done, but I've sort of chickened out of going to any of those conferences, so maybe that will be rectified in the future. But anything like that would be, quite positively received by me. I mentioned to Franklin also the possibility of maybe holding it more geographically close to me, maybe in Europe. And he gave actually the spot answer, which is the correct answer. He said, we'd be delighted to do it, but why don't you get down and make some proposals yourself and maybe organize it or something like that.
Well, one of the things that is very possible that they do in the EU group is to have people, because, once you get over international travel, things become, can be more difficult. I know flying to Europe, especially from Florida, is very cheap. But, people's, on the fixed incomes, especially here in the United States where the income inequality has gone absurd. We don't have the social nets that a lot of people do in Europe, so they have a little bit more protected. But one of the things is to have a European conference, and it doesn't mean that it has to have a ton of people. We've had conferences, with 10 or 12 or 15 people is what we've been. And I will tell you, I enjoy them because having people face to face, talking with people, the conversations you have, you can't substitute that personal interaction, face to face physically. So yeah, I mean that would be a possibility. There's also a second possibility too, and this is sort of a hybrid, sort of. We could have, for instance, what we need to do is we could have local conferences hosted by basically people in a local area. Get people around that area sort of committed to coming, and then having that, and we could even have it at a house. Imagine that. Let's say what we would do is we'd have a conference in Europe, and we would find somebody who'd host at their house where people can come. It won't be, but then we would have this system working. So what it means is that the people will be together, and people will have it, but then they can still be there. For instance, if that's the case, and we would have enough, money is one of the things is if I fly in, I can set up the CMP has a multi-cam system. And so we can do this sort of same thing streaming live. So they would just need me to come in from a longer distance, and then we could do these kinds of things, even because our biggest expense always is having it at a university. It's great to do. In fact, just to let people know, I have been in contact with MIT, and all we need is a person there to sponsor us, and we could have it at a place at MIT. And of course, having a conference at a university like that gives you prestige. But the idea of having actually at a person's home, and people can either stay in close by, even have a few people who don't have the means to maybe stay at a person's home, and then do it that way. We would get rid of the expense of the rooms, of the all that stuff, and even a banquet. We can have just a dinner party. It's those, and at least until we get to the point where we're growing. So that's also a possibility. I mean, we could have it. All we'd have to see is in an area like in the UK area, how many people would be able to come, and if we can get 15 people. And we don't have to worry about having to call a university and getting all that. And then because the biggest problem, Ian, is that if we don't have donations above and beyond what we charge, including our monthly subscriptions, which actually pay the bills, we slowly, our bank account slowly goes up with people, not monthly, yearly, annual dues, even though they're not very much. That's our biggest problem. If I don't next year, or if our donors, I'm sorry to say this, as they get older and they're gone, how are we going to do the conference if I don't have $2,000 or $3,000 coming in that I have to have in order to do a physical conference? Now we can get rid of that if a person sort of does some more of a kind of home thing. So that may be a possibility, Ian. So since you would have to have it in Ireland, where are you again in Ireland? You said
I'm in Dublin.
Oh, and so Dublin, come on, Dublin is a great place. So we could have it. I'll have to send me a layout of your home. But regardless, even somebody locally, that would be a huge thing. If we could locally make our conference basically pretty much zero, or even a person said, look, I'll put in $100, we can rent this hall for 5 days, right? Whatever it is, then I can do the rest from long distance. And then
just a couple of observations. One is that I think in my early discussions with Harry here, he thought I was sort of saying that the dissident physics community was quite strong in Europe and stronger than in the United States. But no, I was saying the opposite, actually. I don't hear very much of it. There was one conference in the UK, I'm not sure if it's held now. As I said, I had to go to the main country of the former Soviet Union to be allowed to speak freely about dissident science, because I found, locally, certainly Kelly got a very bad rap.
Sure.
By the academics for it. So I have said to people that it seems to be very much stronger in the United States than in Europe. And therefore, if something were held here, which I'd be quite in favor of, I think you might find that there would be people coming from North America, maybe, that have a rented crowd. The other thing is, I say it publicly now, but I'm it's really embarrassed to say I'm actually not a member of the CNPS, because I found I couldn't join quite easily. I went in a couple of times and I said, well, I'll join. And it said, oh, you'll have to open an account or something. I'm not sure if I have an account. It might be just a simple IT thing. but you'll find that I participate, and I'm not actually a paid up member.
Okay, well then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to charge you for the last 4 years. So
Right.
you can send me a check. But here's a map I put up here, which is a live database of our people. Now, if you look at that, you're saying there's not people in Europe. There's people in Europe.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
so if you look at here, we can let me see if I can zoom in here. How's it look here? Yeah. So I can come in here. You can see quite a bit now. This database, I don't think I've put in some of the newer members, but we probably maybe only have about 20 members. But these are people from around. Now, what's really interesting about this map that I came up with programming wise is this takes our database and then tries to get their address and tries to pinpoint where they are. Now, the thing that you want to look at and where you can see this is, let me put that up here. For those who want to see this map, want to know where this is, you go to this address. I'm putting it up here now. So if you go to db.naturalphilosophy.org, it's our database. You can see this. Now, if you look at the symbols here, you can see a number of symbols. The ones in green are actually ones that were the second International Conference on Cold Fusion. Here's one here, BioEM. So you can see that these are people. Now the blue ones are our members currently. Okay, you see those blue things. The white ones are people, unfortunately, who have passed on. The mouse overs, I'm putting a mouse over, you can't see them, but on your computer, you'll be able to put your mouse over any of these and see that information. So if you go over to the UK area, you can see here, I can see the mouse overs, but Joseph Hefferman, let's see, and Ian Corn, you are there. I see that there used to be Patrick Fleming. He is now gone. Kelly, that's where Kelly was up in the, you can't see him because my mouse isn't showing up on the transmission. This one at the bottom of Ireland there is Alfred O'Reilly. He's in Cork. Yeah.
No, he's long since deceased, but he was a professor in Cork. He wrote this big tome on electromagnetic.
Right. So this is the work that how did this database come about? It was me, and I built the database and then the interface for it. And in 2008 to 2010, me and Greg Volk went nuts and created this database of over 3,000, almost 3,000 people in conferences and all that. There's also Maurice Cotterell. Maurice Cotterell is also listed in Europe, and Joseph Hefferman. So I'm not sure who those are. Oh, here he is. Joseph Hefferman is history, mythology, biology, electric engineering philosopher. He's in Ireland. Another guy here. Oh, there you can see him. So if you click on it here, there's another guy, is Maurice Cotterell, and I don't know.
I have had occasion to look at those couple of people in Ireland, all right, David, but I don't know them.
Right. Oh, up in here, we actually have a person. Who would this be? David Tome.
David Tome would be there, yes.
Northern Ireland. Right. So anyways, all of those, we do have people. So the idea of maybe having something in Europe, the other place that we could do would be in Germany. And the reason is, now I'm thinking about it, we could do it in Germany. And again, we would make it so that people could participate much more. I think one of the things I'm thinking is we could have people participate more online than we do now. Because when people here in the United States spend all that money to travel and all that, they do want to, and I fill the time in because they've come all that way, and they give 3 and 4 papers, some of the people. But if we were to restrict it to having maybe change the whole philosophy, if I could talk to Dr. Unserker, he may be able to swing and sponsor a place where we could have it. Because he's not wealthy, but he is, I think he could do that. I'm not sure how much he would want to, even with his reputation. But again, this is a possibility. The possibility of us doing something in Europe next year, and those people who can't, you would still pay I think it's $150 for, is what we charge normally. You get your T-shirt, you get the proceedings, you get your credentials, and even those people. What we could do is, all right, you're not there physically, but you would give your talk. Even with the people who are there physically, you do the talk, it would be treated the same way as any other talk. And you would still have to pay your $150. and I think that could work out. So I'm starting to think we could do this in Europe some way. Who knows? How about Germany? Would you go to Germany?
Oh, of course I would. I'd go anywhere.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that sounds good. So let me look into that. This has been really fruitful, actually. So I know there was some question or something that somebody was asking you. I think I had another comment I want to put up here. This is from Richard Jesh, who is a member of the CMPS. He said, yes, the essence of critical thinking is asking questions and answering them. That is so true. I'm going to make that at the next conference. Anybody who has a theory, or we're going to have them, okay, we are going to give you questions ahead of time from everybody, and you have to answer them. And if the answer is, I don't know, or that's a good question, or this is a flaw, then answer it. But that's one of the problems in debate, is you don't get that, or even in talks, because what we have a lot of times is when people have their own theory, they're going to say, well, I only have 60 minutes and it would take me a lifetime to tell me about your theory. I said, look, give me the elevator version. And my architectural professor at Ohio State, when I was taking in architectural school, he says, if you can't explain your big idea of your building to your mother, it's a bad idea. So, but the answering the question is very important. Critical questions about people's theories. So, now, did you have something that you were going to say? You said, do you remember that, or if I completely shut down your memory of what you needed to talk about? There was a question.
Well, I don't want to dominate the proceedings, but I was just going to bring maybe my account a little more up to date, just by telling you about two or three things. And I noticed that people like Bob and Harry say, oh, they want to talk about unipolar induction. So maybe that's one of the things. But I published another paper in Galilean Electrodynamics. God, if you forget the years. There was a long delay, actually, but I think it was published at the end of 2018. It's quite recently. So during 2018, maybe mid-year, I gave a presentation, a Saturday presentation with Franklin Hu on the bones of it. So more recently this year, on the 28th of May, I just happened to have the radio on in the room, and one of the local hosts in one of the popular commercial radio stations was interviewing a professor of physics on the coming centenary of the eclipse expeditions on the 29th of May 1919, which ostensibly had verified Einstein's general theory of relativity. So he gave the normal sort of mainstream account of it, and he said, oh, there were theories that Eddington had sort of fiddled with the data, but the data are available on the internet, and he's gone into them, and they do stand up and all that sort of thing. And he said one or two very slightly inaccurate things I would claim as well. But anyway, so I proposed, so I proposed to Franklin that we have a conference, a Saturday conference on this, where I would play a recording of the 15-minute interview on the radio, and then we could spend the next hour and 3/4 analyzing it, which we did. So that's available on your YouTube channel. It took place on the 8th of June, and we did that, and we were sort of quite critical of it. Now, I'm a member of a little group here. It's not a big scientific group, and it's basically a mainstream scientific group. It's really a private club, which actually dates back to 1868. It was founded as a branch of the Royal Dublin Society, which used to meet on I think the third Tuesday of the month. And they would have a lecture by one of the members, and then they would go to dinner afterwards. So it was a very civilized type of thing. But anyway, it's remained in force over the years, but it got divorced, first of all, from the Royal Dublin Society, so it's no longer part of that. But they kept on, and it became just really a social club where academics and other people interested in science met for dinner on the third Tuesday of the month. Now, I was invited. It's a bit of a secret society, actually, in a way. You're sort of invited to join and so on. So I was invited to join in 1981 by one of my former colleagues who knew I was interested in science, and perhaps he thought I had an inquiring mind. And he was an interesting chap. He's deceased now, but so I've been a member for many, many years. Anyway, I've given them a number of talks, so they know I'm a dissident scientist. And next week, next Tuesday evening, I'm giving a talk on did the 1919 eclipse expeditions prove anything? So it's basically, spurred on by our analysis of the radio program that I referred to, and that's available on YouTube if anybody cares to look at it. And maybe the other thing just to mention is well, I did mention it already that Kelly had done a lot of experiments on the unipolar induction, and I tend to explain it in a way that sometimes is contested by dissidents as well as by mainstream, but that the apparent anomalies, I mean, it's a simple type of thing, that if you have a relative motion by a magnet which is cutting the lines of force, if you like, in a coil, you also have to consider the circuit taking the current back to the galvanometer. So it's also cutting that circuit as well. And if you look at the configuration of the circuits, they cancel. So you can actually get a relative motion between the magnet and the coil when the coil is moving, which gives you zero EMF. You can similarly get movement in unison. The magnet and the coil are moving together, and you get an EMF. There's no relative movement between them, but they're actually inducing current into the remainder of the circuit, taking the wires back to the from the contacts back to the galvanometer. And similarly, if the magnet is moving, you get an EMF. So that's the way I basically define it. Now, we actually have recordings on your YouTube channel, David, of maybe there's a very good conference we had, I don't know, maybe about 2 years ago, which Franklin convened, and that was quite a good conference. We had Harry in it, and we had myself, and we had a few other people.
No, that's really good. One of the things we need to do, and this is really important, and unfortunately, I mean, Franklin does a really great job, but unfortunately, he's not going back and putting necessarily all the time. He does it sometimes, the necessary text in these videos. So one of the things is, if you would like, Ian, it would be a great help. I just can't do everything. Would be to go into these videos, and especially ones that have what you would consider to be much, pretty nice discussions that you think worthwhile for people to look at, and to write a description, a proper description for that YouTube video. A proper title for it as well, if it doesn't have one. The other thing, super important, that people have no idea, but they have no idea how important that is. And these are things called tags. Tags are what you put on a video, just like keywords. Now, when somebody then types in a subject, and you need to tag it in a way, I'm really good at that, because you have to think of all the different things that maybe someone would type in that sometimes not wholly related to what you're talking about, but would then stumble upon what you have, our videos. Now, the thing about that is, though, you have to be very clear and very quick to get to what those things are about, because otherwise, you won't grab them. But those kinds of things are how videos, I know, because I have videos on my site that have 13,000 views in just over a little 2 years. For me and for Dissident, that's quite a bit. Now, and I've learned we need to, for people to come by that, people will find these videos. They're searching all the time, and we have statistics on them. So that's one of the things we need to do, is to catalog all of these dialogues that go on and write these descriptions. And that's not something that's going on. And that's one of the reasons we're not getting necessarily as much people watching, when they probably could, get a lot more people who are interested.
So, I may be wrong actually in this, but it seemed to me at first glance that the new system was less efficacious that way. I think on the old system with the Fuse recordings, we had a date of the conference and maybe a brief description. But I think with the new system, we certainly don't seem to have a date.
Well, no, all of those things I was doing by hand.
Oh. Okay.
When you see those things go on, there is no way that comes automatically. It just is my time. Eventually I just have to cut what I can do in my life, and that's not one of them. And I have to do that even, I had to get my father to do that. I mean, my father is got really great videos on our particle model, but I said, you gotta put description in, you gotta put those tags in, because I can't do it. So yeah, it's like sending out emails to know that this is going on. I have to do that. I've got to go to it. This is not something that, oh, David does it. That's what it is. Oh, Dave will do it. The thing is that I will do it if I can. But for instance, if an email doesn't go about the Saturdays, there's not an automatic setting for it. I put them in. I try to make systems for that. And the other thing is if we have a really great Saturday morning chat coming up, we got to announce it. People are not going to know what it's about. What happens is people will see it after the fact. I'm not going to watch it. I mean, in the beginning we talk about different things. It's not a necessarily focused thing. So we've got to market it ahead of time. That's really important until you get to the point where, of course, like these Saturday mornings, hopefully, as we get more people, because I'm seeing people from my Dissonant Science channel. We have to, try to get more people here. But one of the things this YouTube live is going to do is hopefully get that. So when people happen to wander in, they think it's interesting. So,
but by the way, just on the system, you've had no difficulty bringing me in. But I'm wondering, are you having difficulty bringing people like Harry in who appear to be saying that they want to say some things? And I'm just wondering, I had some difficulties maybe weeks ago that I didn't go into the live thing. I went into the YouTube and I couldn't actually be called up.
Right. No, here's what happens. I'm not sure how I've got Harry up here now. I just saw him. He says, yes. That's great. Super. I'm happy to have him. Harry, I love Harry. So Harry is here now. What happens is this system is you go to stream. The problem has to do with two very important things: the bandwidth of your computer, your internet, and second, your computer's capacity. If you have an old computer, it's not going to be that as easy. And there's not a whole lot. In fact, like I said, I had a 5-year-old PC and I had to buy a new used PC, a souped up one that's fast. It's got a digital drive. And that's the reason I can host these, because I knew I'd be hosting these kinds of things on my own channel. So, and we do it a lot. I do this. I also use the same technology for doing people around the world. So I have people from Brazil, for instance, coming in. I do one in Portuguese, and these people are on phones, but those things will cut in and out. This is beta. When I look at, in fact, I think if I put this up here just to show you before I let Harry in, here's the logo. Well, no, that's not it. This logo here on my page in this says beta, B-E-T-A. So it's still new. I think it's a great system, but it's going to have its problems. It's going to lose connection sometimes, but it has to do with the power. Yours isn't, why is yours working and someone else is not? So a lot of it has to do with my computer. I think Franklin's computer is really slow. And if that computer is slow, then we have problems. Anyways, I want to get off that, and I'm going to take myself out, and you guys go ahead and talk, Harry. Hey, Harry, you got your, can I hear you? Give it a test here. Delay. Hello.
Well, I've been having lots of problems, and a couple of things you mentioned happened to me. I've been disconnected about 5 times so far, maybe 6. And every time I try to enter in a chat comment, it disconnects me. So
yeah, it has to do with your computer. Issues. The issue. Yeah, I know, but the issue is the computer.
I don't even know if you heard me. Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
Well, it doesn't happen. Well, I'm not gonna.
Well, here's the thing is, Harry. The only thing I can say, Harry, is that Ian.
I think my computer is pretty fast. But anyway,
your image is not so wonderful either, if you don't mind me saying. It's not as clear as David's or mine.
Okay, but I'm gonna let you go.
Ian's breaking up here, by the way.
Yeah,
Okay.
but on my side, I hear him and see him fine. So no problem. Let's skip
So
back
are
to
you hearing me without breaking up?
zero problem.
Am I breaking up there, Ian?
No, I can hear you perfectly, Harry. It's just your image isn't so wonderful, but your voice is fine.
All right. When you were okay, fine. When you were talking about Alf Kelly, that really interested me a lot because I've been recently rereading his paper, which I've read many years ago, about unipolar induction. And I have only the version on the internet, which is, I'm not sure, which it says it's a summary or a combination of the two papers that he published. Are you familiar with the one I'm
Yeah,
talking
the
about?
two monographs, I think he called them.
Right. They're not available on the internet as far as I know, which is kind of unfortunate. But anyway, I recently did a paper on what I did was I went around the internet and I tried to find all of the videos that have been put out on the internet relating to unipolar induction experiments. And one of the things that's good about this is that instead of when you write a paper and then you reference another paper of a guy who did some experiments with the YouTube technology, you can actually see the experiment being done on the internet. So what I did was I went around and I researched all of the experiments that are out there on the internet. Well, it turns out they're more than you would think. And so this is in a paper that I recently did, and it's not published anywhere. You'd have to email me if you're interested in reading that paper. And my email address is kc3mx@yahoo.com, and I'll send you a copy if you want to see that. I do. There was a video where the guy criticized Al Kelly, said that Al Kelly came to the wrong conclusion. I don't know if you've seen that, Ian.
No, I haven't.
A British guy, physicist, put out, and that's a typical sort of thing. So it makes you wonder, if there's a negative impact on Al's work. But Al takes a sort of very traditional approach to the unipolar induction problem, which you mentioned, which is that the flux cutting occurs in the circuit twice. And that's part of his argument in his paper that's on the internet. I've done a lot of work on this, and I've looked at all of the experiments that I could find, all of the papers that do experiments. And what I've learned very interesting is that there's just dozens and dozens. I mean, it's a really deep subject because a lot of work was done in the 19th century that we don't really even know about anymore because, people just ignored what was done in the 19th century. And I discovered doing research that, there are a lot of workers who did work in this in the 19th century, and they're not even mentioned in any of the modern papers, which kind of is interesting. But the fact of the matter is this subject has been really beat to death as far as the experiments are concerned. But the net result is nobody really can prove that any of the theories about unipolar induction are correct, even though mountains and mountains of experiments have been done. So this is kind of, in my opinion, a failure of scientific method. And that's kind of an interesting problem in that it looks like there are at least 3 different theories that you can talk about. And all of the 3 different theories are consistent with all of the experiments. So the experiments are unable to differentiate between the 3 major theories. The 3 major theories would be the Maxwellian Faraday theory of flux cutting, and then there's the Einstein's theory of relativity, and then there's the Ampere theory Ampere-Weber theory, and they all seem to be consistent with the experiments, but they're all different theories. So the scientific method hasn't worked to resolve this problem as to what is unipolar induction, and that sort of leads you to the other problem, which is, since unipolar induction is part of induction in general, it looks like we don't understand induction at all, electromagnetic induction at all. No comments on that, huh?
Well, the only thing I would just add, maybe, I mean, the point is taken. We need to perform maybe some further experiments, which will eliminate, the possibilities which are not in accordance with reality. But
what's interesting is that the only theory that the experiments seem to discount or eliminate from the competition is Einstein's theory, which I find most interesting. And that theory seems to be refuted by the unipolar induction experiments. And since that's the basis of his entire theory, as is well known, he introduces that in the first page of his 1905 paper. That leads people who are anti-Einsteinians to Einstein's theory is refuted. That's another topic, of course.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I just lost my train of thought for a second, but that's basically what I was going to say, Harry. I mean, if you sort of like want to indicate a problem with relative motion, you just take a simplistic view of the unipolar induction experiments, and you find that when the magnet and the coil move together, and nevertheless you do get an induced EMF, and therefore relativity is wrong. But Kelly's experiments, if you interpret it in the way that he interprets the experiments, actually indicates that it is the relative motion between the magnet and the coil which always is the determining factor. So in a way, even though his and by the way, these experiments, I'm not sure if the full panoply of the experiments, but the basis of the experiments is given in the book that David showed a moment ago, Challenging Modern Physics. But all these experiments, he says, well, even though the book is challenging modern physics and particularly the special theory of relativity, nevertheless, he maintains that unipolar induction does not of itself challenge the relativity system, whether it's Einsteinian or Galilean.
Well, I'm going to comment on that, and that's correct as far as those experiments go. But the problem is that the Einstein theory says that when the magnet spins, it creates an electric field. Okay, because in Einstein's theory of relativity, he goes into a lot of detail. The whole point of the paper, Electrodynamics of Moving System, the whole point of it is to prove that a moving electron creates a magnetic field through the special theory of relativity. Now, the special relativity theory says that if a magnet is spinning, it should create an electric field, and that the unipolar induction is caused by the electric field that's created by the spinning magnet. But there are no experiments that show that a spinning magnet creates an electric field.
And the other thing is, I don't know what Einstein or the special theory of relativity would say about whether this field rotates with the magnet. I rather suspect, as maybe some modern operatives would think, that the field doesn't rotate with the magnet, and therefore the magnet is cutting its own field, and hence producing an EMF. But Kelly's experiments, I think anyway, would indicate that the field actually does rotate with the magnet.
Well, that's one of those interesting arguments. The whole issue of experiments for about the last 100 years have been tried issue. It's ironic that Einstein said the problem was irrelevant or not important, and whether the field rotates or not. But when you read the papers of the people who are advocating the Einsteinian or the relativistic theory of explaining unipolar induction, they always throw in there that the spinning magnet creates an electric field. That's essential to the whole relativistic explanation of the phenomenon. And so to say that the field isn't in motion sort of contradicts the essence of what is necessary for them to claim the production of the electric field that is the essence of the unipolar induction effect. So that just, leads you into another conundrum and contradiction, which pervades this whole discussion of unipolar induction. And that's why they call it Faraday's paradox. If you go into Wikipedia, it's Faraday's paradox. So it's just another paradox of Einstein's relativity, which is totally nothing but a big paradox as far as anybody can say. I mean, you just stumble from one paradox to another paradox when you talk about Einstein and his theory. It's just paradoxical.
And we all know, I know you very much, Harry, that certain things are introduced, ad hoc things are introduced to save the hypothesis. And if I might, that reminds me of the one other thing I wanted to say, I mentioned to David, and I haven't seen this anywhere, but maybe you people have seen it, but it's quite recent. I mean, I haven't seen it promulgated by us or in the dissident news. I saw something in The Guardian just recently, some days ago, newspaper, whereby I try to summarize it now, whereby they have two methods of calculating what they call the Hubble constant. I mean, I don't accept the Hubble linear law, but
another one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, what one is by actually measuring, they call recession. I don't agree with that either. Anyway, the redshift and recession, of distant galaxies, and the other is by looking at what they consider. Again, I don't believe this. I'm not advocating it. I'm just telling you what they look at. They look at the early stages of the universe, the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background, and they're getting two different values of the Hubble constant. They don't differ very much, but they're different. They're saying, for example, if you accept one, you get an age of the Earth that's 13.8 thousand million years ago, and if you accept the other, it's 12.5 thousand million years ago. So anyway, so the scientists have now said, I think in Cambridge or something, they said, oh, there's something wrong. So we need to invent a new thing called dark radiation. We have dark matter, we have dark energy. Now we're introducing dark radiation to explain this, so that there was even a greater accelerative anomaly at the beginning of the universe. But one of the scientists in Cambridge, I think Rees, it's not the Son Royal, REIES, I think. He said, well, we have enough ad hoc hypotheses. We've brought in dark matter and dark energy, which he believes in. But he says he's resisting bringing in dark radiation. Now, I don't know if any of you have actually seen that. Let's see, you've put up something there, David, have you? That's precisely the article.
I saw that. I saw that, but I didn't read the details.
Yeah. Well, I hope I haven't.
The problem is that the Hubble constant. The problem with the Hubble constant is that it's very difficult to really pin down what it was, and it's been it's been a source of concern years since I was a young kid, and it's they're arguing about it, and it's kind of like whatever you want to say it is, whatever number you want to attach to it seems to be based on which particular group of scientists you think did the best job of determining what it is. But it's at one time it was a very, very high, which meant that the universe that the universe was younger than the oldest stars, but they kept making it so that the universe is older than the older stars. And I'm afraid what you got here is that if it's 12 billion years old, then there are stars older than 12 billion years, and that's kind of a problem for a theory, the Big Bang theory. So they want to keep the Hubble constant at the right value so it doesn't contradict any.
Yeah, that's mentioned in the article.
Determining. Huh?
They do mention
yes,
that.
So in essence, they want to make sure that the universe.
Hello, you've gone dead.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up now.
Yeah, that the universe is not younger than what they know to be the age of the oldest stars.
Well, that's a contradiction.
So, guys, yeah, one of the interesting things I'm always running across, even with people in our own group, there was a really great, a couple of really great papers by, one of them was by Cameron Ribisol about him breaking down basically the gravitational field of galaxies into the shape, because, and I did a video on that. It's interesting that they found two galaxies that they say there's no dark matter. I don't talk about dark energy because energy is a concept, but dark matter. And they're spherical. Now, what's really amazing is that they're spherical, so all the predictions of how much the gravitational field, that the star velocity on the edge of those are going to be what's predicted by Kepler and Newton. What happens when you take a disk galaxy? It's absolutely not a spherical gravitational field, yet we treat it like that. And so Ribisol basically broke that down into arms and pieces and started applying Newton's gravity to the arms of a rotating I'm going to see if I can find, I got that article online, I think, but to a rotating galaxy. So basically, it turns out that the velocities that are measured for stars on the edge of the galaxy are totally predictable by Newton if you actually apply Newtonian physics to the non-spherical galaxy that most spiral galaxies are. Now, that, of course, goes against, just pretty much pulls the rug out from under dark matter, because anytime you have dark, the thing that dark does, dark matter, dark energy, whatever you want to call it, is something that you can win a Nobel Prize for. That's what it is. And it's something that even if you pull the rug out from under it, we still want to get it because these people want to win their prize and become, famous. But it's amazing to me how even people who are dissidents will describe, I won't say who, I'm not here to make any accusations, but there's somebody who I admire quite a lot who continues to say, well, dark matter is this, and it's because, their model will show this. And I said, why is it that you don't address what Cameron Ribisol has shown? Also, my father had a really nice paper on, if you look at the velocities, there's a curve. I'm going to see if I can find that. That's a very shocking paper. Let me see if I have that online. Gravity is pushed forward. Okay, here it is. See if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to show this. This is quite amazing. If you look at this curve, that blue line there is the speed of stars from our galaxy, from the center of our galaxy on out. And if you look at those, I did a video on this Dissident channel, on my Dissident channel. So if anybody who's like a subscriber, go and take a look up Dissident Science, dark matter. And what you see in this line, this blue line, are the arms and the spaces between the arms. And that's showing that obviously, and it is, because we know that the gravitational field is not a regular gravitational field. If you have more stars in one place in the arm and less in the space between, the gravitational fields are different. And the Keplerian orbits, this is sort of my father's trying to plot it there. That's because they're treating it as a sphere, and it isn't. So when you put this stuff together, you then have to say, okay, if Newton's theory says we can describe the origin of the dark matters because we couldn't explain why it's going faster. So what do? We invent the Higgs particle. We invent a neutrino. We invent quarks. We invent dark matter. And therefore, that gives us something to go find, give ourselves Nobel Prizes, etc. But when I even confront and I talk to people in our organization about this finding, again, it's that same problem. When we ask questions of people with theories and models, or even just an idea about something, you confront them with real calculations, with a real answer saying, look, Newtonian physics works fine, no dark matter needed. They just don't address it. They just sweep under the rug and then continue to tell you how they can say that dark matter is real. I mean, it's interesting that even when you look at the article, Ian, that you pointed out, well, they're going to say, well, yeah, what happens over time, you talk about it long enough, dark matter, then the dark energy. Now this other person throws out the third one, they're going to go, oh, that's too much. It was like the neutrinos. This neutrino is too big, so our unicorns, your unicorn's like an elephant unicorn, we can't accept that one, so we'll accept the other one. So it's almost like over time, talking about these things, that you end up with these articles that talk about it. And when I look at it, it says, look, there is no dark matter even. We know that was conjectured because we didn't do this application correctly of Newton's gravity.
Can I comment on this a little bit?
Sure, absolutely.
I noticed, I agree with you about this, but let's just talk about unipolar induction as an example. Okay, this is a phenomenon that has been around since 1831.
Sure.
And actually earlier, because it goes back to Ampere invented homopolar motor, I think in 1821. And as I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of experiments done in the 19th century. There was a big controversy in the 19th century with Tolliver Preston and this argument, does the field rotate with a magnet or does it not? Mm-hmm. Okay, because Faraday concluded in order to make his flux cutting rule valid that the field did not rotate. Mm-hmm. And sure. Since then, and then Einstein got involved in the whole, with his 1905 paper. And so that was a whole nother interpretation that got thrown into the mix. Well, anyway, my point is these experiments are not difficult to do. Right. They don't require bundles and bundles of money.
Right.
But here we are in 2019, and there's no satisfactory theory that is able to explain this effect. So why does anybody think that these dealing with Hubble's constant and dark matter and all this other stuff, why would they have an answer? I mean, they can't even tell us how magnetism creates electricity. What makes anybody think they can tell us how the universe started?
I agreed 100%.
Or
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, climate change. They got a theory about climate change. It's all just whoever has the loudest voice, whoever has the most followers, academic community, his theory gets adopted. That's why we have Einstein. And we know Einstein's theory is full of so many, it's just full of holes, contradictions, absurdities, paradoxes, doesn't make sense to the average person, but yet they're basing all of their theories about the universe and everything else on a theory that really is not got good mathematics behind it, doesn't have a whole lot of solid experimental proof, and doesn't seem to be valid at all when applied to unipolar induction, which is supposedly the reason it was invented.
well, I agree with that, and sometimes I wish I didn't. But unipolar induction is a good example, and perhaps it's a spur to our being skeptical about general scientific views, but. Complementary perhaps to what David was saying, with regard to the Newtonian sort of predictions. And getting back to Kelly again, I just might mention one other thing. One of the things, he was quite fertile in ideas, and this is another idea that I've actually looked into. he points out really that when we look at a picture of the sky, say a distant galaxy, we're not looking at a snapshot. Now, this seems to be something that's been neglected completely by established science. What we're looking at is an amalgam of light rays that have emanated from different times. So, for example, if we see an object, a very distant object, pinpoint object, well, that is a distance from us in light years equal to the number of years ago that the time that light emanated from that object. Now, if it emanated earlier, well, the light hasn't reached us yet, so we can't see it. If it came later, the light has already passed us, so we can't see it either. So we're seeing only objects that are the same distance away from us as the time in light years ago that the light was emitted. So it's an amalgam of things, and therefore, when we look at things like the spiral arms of galaxies, they mightn't be real at all. They might be just like perhaps even the same object in different positions spinning around. Now, I was at a lecture in one of the astronomy clubs some years ago, and one of an astrophysicist, I think from Leicester University or something, and I just happened to mention that to him as a question. I said, "Have you not considered that?" And he just open-mouthed, and he didn't answer the question. He just, it's something which seems fundamental but hasn't been addressed by for example, that article that we talked about.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things is that when we are looking at all of this stuff, because my father and I are working on a model, and what we insist.
David. Oh, David's
are you
back.
Here? Okay, yeah, it's a little delayed. He's a little
You're
delayed.
Back now.
Yeah, you hear me, Ian?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly, David.
Okay, good. But one of the things is when my father and I are doing our model, we have a physical model for electricity. We have a physical model for. I'm not here to tell you our model's correct, but what I'm saying is when we are working on a model, we insist that we have we know exactly what electricity is, what exactly what we say is physically what magnetic fields are, how those work with magnets, how those work with the atoms. All of those things in our model we have to have if we are going to have a model. And to me, what you end up with is you have to match, obviously, what you see in observations. And sometimes what you see with our model is that we actually match what's in the observations, but it wasn't what we thought it would be, even with our own model. And it does, again, it's not here. I'm not here to push it that is right or wrong. What I'm saying is I and my father are not going to do anything that's going to involve simply the mathematics of magnetism, the mathematics of electromagnetism, the mathematics of what happens when you have a moving charge. You have a real problem. The whole problem with an electron or moving is with the positive and negative. We put a plus sign with our pencil on this, a minus sign with our pencil on this, and then we say they move together. That's really wonderful. And I think a lot of discussions about whether magnets are creating current flow or what is really causing these things. If you don't have a physical model, it's sort of moot, at least with my father and I, when we talk about it, because, you know, again, when I'm listening to it, it's like, okay, you have a negative, what does that have to do with it? When I'm listening to discussions that you guys are talking about these experiments, I'm trying to think, when I hear the explanations, I get completely mixed up because we have a physical model for it. I don't have to put a positive on something or a negative on something. It moves because there's a force. We know what the force is, at least in our model, what we would think it is. And that's interesting. I think when I hear that from a person who says, well, when we look at our model, this is what happens, and this is why it happens. I don't get the same. I don't see all. I think there's some artificial problems created because we have charge in the middle of all these things, because we have negative and positive, because there are lots of people who argue to their grave today that charge is a fundamental thing in the universe. And if it's a fundamental thing, Why? I mean, why? Charge came from Benjamin Franklin, for goodness sakes. He's the first person that put positive and negative. So a person from a perspective of a person who myself and my father are working on models with real particles flowing around that we call gravity, that we call light, that we call electricity, that we call magnetism. Again, I'm not here to push the model. I'm just saying when we look at it that way, we just have a whole different set of criteria when we look at an experiment. So when we look at an experiment, how is our particle model going to play that?
Can I address this issue, David?
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. It's a delay.
Can I address this a little bit, if you might? I'm going to say right off the bat, I studied this issue rather thoroughly for 20 years now, very assiduously. And the physicists can't tell us what electricity is. They can tell us how it behaves based on definitions like positive charge and negative charge. And that's pretty much all they can do. They have a descriptive theory. That's what physics is. It's a descriptive theory. It describes things, and it tries to describe things through mathematics. But it really presents a problem when you try to get down to what these things are that you're talking about. And that's where it starts to break down. Now, what happens when I'm talking about the unipolar induction is that the induction problem is how does electricity, which is the electric field, and how does the magnetic field? Now, we know that they're related to each other and there are rules that relate them to each other, but we don't really know how magnetism turns into electricity in a generator. So, these power companies are creating electricity, continuously, and we don't know how that happens. I'm sorry, I have a phone call.
Well, I'll address that a little bit. But I think, again, this is interesting because in our model, we addressed exactly that. The problem is my father's an electrical engineer. He was a very good electrical engineer. One of the problems we talk about are circuits. And what happens is you have a battery and somehow it's pushing what we call current and it's flowing through, it goes around, you then modulate it, you manipulate it, you then send it out an antenna. And at that point, something magical happens in physics. Supposedly, electron turns into a photon in waves. How does that happen? All of those things, in fact, again, I agree with what Harry's saying, is that unless you have a physical model, we have a physical model. That's what we are working on. And again, I'm not here to push it. I'm just saying having the perspective of a model where these are things that, for instance, in our model, these things move at the speed of light. Gravity moves at the speed of light. Light moves at the speed of light. Electricity inside our circuits are moving at the speed of light, although people say that's meters per second. We have magnetism, all of those things. It turns out that in our model, we use the same particle at all, and we can explain it. It's just the behavior of those particles. Now, the unipolar induction, we'll be able to take our model and figure out, well, okay, how does that work? Now, but the thing is, at least for good or bad, we don't talk about math. We would talk about the flow of how these things work, why they go that way, the physicality of them, and that will give you answers. And again, I agree. Harry and I are saying the same thing. We're saying that the problem is that science doesn't know what an electron is. We don't really know. If you go back and look at it, you can't really find much about what that is. Magnetism, we have no idea. So we need to make physical models, and people who have physical models need to answer these questions. Otherwise we're going to be caught up day after day talking about, spinning this and current that, when we don't even know what current is. In our model, it turns out to be that current, here's what they say about, you're an electrical engineer, Ian, right? Here's what they say current is in today. If you go and sit in a physics classroom, they say it's the hole left behind by an electron moving in the opposite direction. How ridiculous is that? I mean, that's absolutely an absurdity. Yet that's what we say. So if you would ask the electrical engineers, which is really interesting, Ian, the best people in the last 30 years I've met in the MPA and the CMPS, the best engineers and the best scientists have been electrical engineers. And it's really,
I've heard that said before, actually, David.
I am absolutely flabbergasted at the people who I relate to more and who are the most skeptical about things, and is the electrical engineer. And my father and I now have a model for what we believe can describe everything: magnetics, electricity, light, gravity, all of it. And we are applying that to my dad is applying that to electronic circuits. Now, what's really interesting is we're finding out very interesting things, like a battery holds charge and has a magnetic field. If you take a battery, you can actually measure the magnetic field just like a magnet. And that batteries themselves keep a lot of its energy not only inside that package, but around that package. And these insights that we're getting on what a diode is, how it really works, how a resistor is, how it really works. The only reason we have insights, and part of our book that's coming out next year is an entire section. If you go to particle.guru, folks, if you go there, you can see my father. This is just an example of where two of us have gotten together and we said, okay, we've put together some three additions to Newton's principal laws that we have put together, and we said, okay, how does this actually apply to all these things? And we're getting answers for it. This is the direction we need to go. And my father and I look at other models, and those other models don't even address this. And I'm thinking, guys, we don't know what all those things are.
By the way, you seem to be a good combination. Your father is an electrical engineer, but you're principally, are you a scientist or an engineer or a classicist even? You seem to have certain...
Well, if I would describe myself, I'm actually an artist and a scientist, both. In fact, since the age of 3, I've been drawing. I've actually sold paintings to one of the best museums on the West Coast. So I'm not here to tell people about it, but I'm an artist. And I think what happens is because of my artist side and my science side, my actual science side is more my studies is in my area, and I've been in for 30 years, is artificial intelligence. And I'm a person that's a systems person. If you were to ask me what I like to do and why I like computer science, I like to come up with systems that work and repeat, sort of like building machines, and have them go do stuff for them so we don't have to do it. That's interesting to me. And I think what I've naturally, with both my artistic side yells to me at the top of my lungs, why doesn't anybody know on planet Earth that we have no idea what light is, what gravity is, what those things are? Because artists have this tendency where they want to tell truths that are unknown. That's what artists are. So that's the reason I jumped into this and became an advocate, a voice for this, and learned about it. The other side is I'm a systems person. So it's really hard for me to get any book on any, on the bubble Earth here. So people send me these because they know I'm open to reading everything. And I love reading them because I look at the systems. I figure, and I think because of that naturalness, the one side of the artist side saying, I will not stand by when huge unknown things, which are real big truths that we need to know in science, that side gets to me in front and up here and talking with you and starting a YouTube channel. I'd rather be working on my book with my dad than doing this. But the artistic side, it sort of makes me the rebel. And the other side is the system side, which I can't help to see something and then come up with a system for it. Over the years, my dad and I's particle model came about because during the last 20 to 30 years, I collected the best ideas to me that I saw. Infinity from Borchardt, the Deneu, what I coined the Deneu effect by Lionel Deneu and his underwater experiments showing what probably magnetism is. And my father came up in 2015, a real solution to the wave particle duality. The first one I ever saw. We put those all together, and all of a sudden we had this model. And we went to town with it for the last 4 or 5 years. Those kinds of systems, I can't help it. When it gets in my head, and you say something to me, Ian, like the unipolar induction, my father and I are going to work on that, and he's going to do a video on that, and that's what So that's where I'm coming from. I come from the artist side who wants to tell the world truths and can't stand it. That's what art is. And then on the other side, just I can't help it when I see a program. In fact, what's weird about me as a programmer, I have spent more time in my life writing programming systems for programmers than I have actually programming. I'm actually one of the, me and my friend came up with a computer programming language for natural languages. I mean, we actually invented a programming language, and we're actually starting to put that out there. So that's sort of why I am around, why I do things. And what's been really amazing, Ian, is working with my father, who I really didn't know as a scientist. He and I had a rough beginning when he was younger. He had a rough childhood. I had a little rough childhood, but then we came together, and I have never had so much fun in my life working with this particle model, my dad, with electronic circuits. And we actually have an explanation for dispersion, how white light turns into and real things. It's not, there's no equations at all. We will tell you why these particles go in this direction, what light is, why it's looked at as this color. And he and I have been just in heaven and having fun, being like the first persons to try to use this kind of model for this. And so that's where I come. And the other thing too, Ian, is really important to me, is to support the artist side of me, wants to support everybody who is out there trying. I don't care if you've come up with the craziest idea. I will give you credit until we change our entire learning university system, until we get to the point where we are open in universities to challenge Einstein, to challenge the Big Bang and all that. Then I would, I'm going to champion everybody. I don't care if I agree with you, if it's got problems. I know Harry Ricker and I are on the same page most of the time, because I will challenge even the, ether theories. Here's a problem. No one in our group with ether theories will address these problems. They just keep going. And I sit there and I know that I think the reason I have a lot in common with Harry is because he has to, as we say, play the same note on the same piano over and over with these people with their theories. They're not answering these questions. My father and I are. In fact, if you come at us with something that we haven't thought of, like induction, what do you say about it? We're going to go at it and we're going to try to come up with an answer for it. But, but I will say I'm still to the point where I really want to support everybody, because we have to get as many people with the ability to go with their crazy ideas or not, and let everybody choose from them. Let the internet be full of all kinds of things. What will come out of that will be people. It's this idea that, it's like the flat earthers. The flat earthers, I know from inside information, I talked to some of the people who talked to the original flat earthers. It's a prank. And it's a prank really out there to sort of see how far they can go. It only distracts people and puts us into a bad position, because now people go, look, people don't believe in science. Look at the earth. No, it's a joke. It's the crop circles of our time. And so I'm going to support people with theories. I will support this guy who's got the bubble earth, space-time, gravity, and the evolving earth. If you read the back of this book, it's got some really great stuff. Yeah, I may not subscribe because I have a different model, but I'm going to support him. The reason is, until we get to the point where we all are allowed to speak and do what we think is right, then my thing is, I try to preach to you and everybody else, at least applaud the people for be out there and try to come up with something new, an idea outside the box, because right now we got to support that as well. Anyways, folks, I'm going to any closing arguments, Ian, since I've talked to you. I know I think Harry's bopped out of here. Any closing remarks? First of all, I do want to say it was wonderful to talk to you today. I really enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoy. I'm not surprised I enjoy talking with you, because I enjoy Harry Ricker a lot, even though we've had fights about. He and I are politically, I think, on opposite ends. I just think that,
He must
the
be
world.
It's Greg Volk then.
Yeah, and I'm really close friends with Greg Volk, and we're on opposite spectrum. But when it comes to science and the love of science, you may believe on, the age of the Earth is this, and someone the age of the Earth is that. But if you look at those people, still have the same questions. Greg Volk and I still have the same basic questions. We don't know what these things are. Let's try our hardest to do it, and let's not stifle people who have crazy ideas on that. But it was great talking with you. Did you want to make a few closing points before we stop here?
Well, I know it's coming. It's actually past the time, and I won't delay. But one thing that occurred to me, David, just apropos what you've just said, is that I think you're very positive, and you have one very positive attribute in that you don't want to hide things. You don't want to hide your light under a bushel. Now, I think maybe a slight vice of mine is I sometimes dismiss people. I say, they'll never listen to that. So what? Let them go in their error. And it's only if they come to us and ask us, what the explanation is. So I and that's probably not something to be very proud of. But
it's being honest, though. That's what's important.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I think it is, Ian, that I think as long as we're honest with ourselves, I think that's important, because we can all have our biases, right? I mean, Greg and I think, get along so well because he and I have a great empathy for anybody who's doing anything outside the mainstream, because we know what it takes, So it's like, heck, yeah, it's crazy, but we're here for you because we understand that you understand there's some problem with it. I mean, that's the big thing. And those people who will listen to you, that's great. Those people who won't. But if we don't include those people under our big tent, what happens is then we become dogmatic, and what we end up with is a CNPS of a bunch of people who are all, as two Finnish people who never came back. They were, I think it was 2002 or 2005, to the MPA conference at the University of Connecticut. They never came back. And here's what the Finnish guy, we were outside on the balcony, and this was with Dominus Spencer, and it was a really amazing group of people. A lot of them are gone now. But he came to me and he says, you know what the problem with this group is? We have all we have are salesmen and no buyers. And that's what we need to do, is say, okay, you and I can be at a conference and I'm pushing this theory and you're pushing that and you have these ideas. But what we still need to do is champion those people. When people would get up in the NPA days and they talked about something and they have drag out fights, they would still have the respect of each other. And they would still say, keep going. I don't agree with you, but don't stop, because if we don't support each other, who is? So I think that's an important part. And I think that's what I'm finding out even more. I'm surprised that I'm talking with people who are in my group on my live Fridays. He goes, he talks about UFOs, and I start talking with him. And the thing he's talking about is he's not interested in UFOs so much. He's interested in great technologies. And when I start talking to him about it, he goes, yeah, you know what it is we're not getting that from physics. Why? It's because how can we control gravity if we have absolutely no idea what it is? So I think we can build on those kinds of things.
And I hope this openness and honesty will prevail, David, because a slight weakness is brought in by our very strength. Our strength in being open and inquisitive and not having an orthodoxy is actually at present a weakness in terms of getting our message to the populace, because they say, oh, they can't agree among themselves, so why should I?
Right.
Whereas if they had one group which is all homogeneous and no dissent, that could be accepted.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll wrap up. We'll have to wrap up. But I've said this a number of times, and that is the idea. In fact, if you go back to 2010 or 2012. I don't remember. Look up David D. Hilster and consensus in science. To me, consensus in science is exactly the wrong thing. The consensus in science happens automatically. That is, you have everybody's opinion, and if somebody's idea catches on and it works, it's going to happen whether you agree with it or not. And so the idea that we have only one model and everybody subscribes to it is a very much controlling university, dogma kind of idea. The idea that you can have 5 models of the universe and use that. Well, look at every other profession on the planet Earth. I'm a computer programmer. I know at least 20 computer languages, and I use probably 10 of them all the time. Why? Why don't we have one computer language? Well, the universe is more complicated than that. So why is it that we have to have one model necessarily of the universe that's the only model and that we all agree upon? So we have to get away from these ideas, and that's hard. All right, folks, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks. I want to thank, as always, Franklin for doing these great chats. And for if you have any papers you want to talk about or any subjects, you can email us at, all you have to do is go to our contacts. I'll put some of these up here. These are our websites. If you want to read more about us, if you're a beginner, go to sciencewoke.org. If you're a person who's a little bit more advanced, you can go to naturalphilosophy.org. Take a look at it. If you want to help out, we have lots of things that people can help out with. So that's certainly, and you can become a member. I'm going to work with Ian. He is going to become our next paying member. I'll work with him on email on that. But we do have paying members. It's $35 for people who are retired and $50 a year. And this is yearly. What does it do? It pays for this kind of venue. It pays for our websites. It pays for our email blasts. And all that, and especially if you're a person who does have money or knows people who invest, we have projects that we need to do. A lot of it has to do with the preservation of scientific work that can be lost very easily. I've got videos back here that in a box right over here that need to be digitized. I've been working on that. We need to get our papers on. I have a Wikipedia that I upgraded the PHP. It's not working. So we have all kinds of things that we can work on, putting information, and scientists like Ian, if you want, it would be great to have the science that you were talking about today as on our Science Woke website. Also information we have in the Wikipedia about him. And also people, if you want to write, Ian, if you so think about it, think about writing for us. We're always looking for people to write articles for the general public. You seem to have a good handle on that. So we're always looking for people to write some really good articles for the public to get them interested in becoming critical thinkers. So thank you so much once again, everybody, and all the members of the CMPS and all those people who have stumbled upon us. We're here every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific time for 2 hours, and are always welcome. If you have the greatest theory out there and you want people to know about it, you can always contact us at one of these addresses. We have contacts there that you can find. We'd be happy to talk about it. You got to be open-minded, because we are open-minded, look at new stuff, but we also have very strict scientific minds where we don't we're not going to sit by. We do ask questions, and we try to push science forward. So thank you all. I'm David D. Hilster, one of the directors of the CMPS, filling in for Franklin, and this will end our broadcast for today. If you've missed it, you can go back and see it both on Facebook, our Facebook page, and YouTube, which you can see here, which I'll leave for you if you want to go back and see it. There's some really great discussions today with Ian Cohen, I want to thank, and Harry Ricker. Take care, everyone.